Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Mikkel Thorpe, and this is the Expat Money Show. Today's guest is the host of the Shaun Newman podcast, where he talks about faith, family, Canadian life, and topics that divide humanity. I had the pleasure of meeting Shaun in person and speaking at his Cornerstone event earlier last year, and in my home country of Canada. It was an amazing experience, pretty wild to be up in the north of Alberta, back in my home and native land. Without further ado, please welcome Shaun Newman. Shaun, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mikkel. Thanks for having me on your side of things. I think when you were up in this part of the country, it got coined that we are 2 hours east of the edge of the world. I've been using that ever since. I find it humorous, and I'm sure at times people, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
I still am surprised that I ended up going because, okay, so a quick backstory is I was on your program and we hit it off instantly. And then afterwards, I think we talked for like another hour off the microphone. And you're like, I've got this conference. You got to come. And I was like, great. Sounds amazing. Where is it? Canada. It's like, fuck no, not happening. Not a chance. Sorry, buddy. And then you emailed me like, I really think you should come. You really think you should come. And, over a month. And then you're like, Tom Luongo is going to be speaking and Alex Craner is going to be speaking. I'm like, two of my favorite people I know very well and have interviewed and have spoke at my events, and they're going to be there in person. I was like, Shaun, fine, I'll come. And so I did. And it was not just Canada. It was like, well, maybe you can describe.
Well, sure. I'll add in. Here's my side of the story. So I bring Mikkel on, and one of the things a year ago, and certainly a couple of years ago, is people were, this already, and your audience probably is part of the group that left. There's things going on in Canada, and continue to go on in Canada, that made people like, there's got to be something better out there. And so when I interviewed you, you fit the bill of like, oh my goodness, people are looking for this. This is what the Cornerstone Forum that has become my annual event. This is what it's about. It's about bringing together community, but it's also about trying to solve some problems for people, right? So the idea was, and listen, I got a lot of flack for bringing you there. Lots of people loved it. Lots of people didn't want it. People don't want to hear people are leaving Canada. That's unnerving. And, the brain drain, not to mention the economics of it, which you can explain way better than I can. But certainly when I listened to you, I went, oh, people are looking for this. They want to hear about this more. And so when I invited Mikkel, when I invited you, you're like, no. And I'm like, oh. But I don't take no very well, right? Like I'm kind of like, well, yeah, maybe I could frame it different and you'd be more interested. And I just kept working on you, and you probably can speak to this better than anyone. I'm kind of relentless. Like, you're kind of like, I don't know. I got this going on. I got a kid coming. I'm doing this. I'm like, well, that isn't a no.
I was actually a pretty firm, like, hell no, not a chance ever. Yeah. And then over a couple of months, you wore me down and you got me. So you're definitely persuasive.
I read a book, Never Split the Difference, and one of the things in the middle of it was, when you find no, it's actually a good thing, right? It's like, well, no, okay, well, what do you mean by no? Like, no, can you prove out these things? Okay, well, we could probably do that, and we could probably figure that out. And I'm a problem solver, and once again, if I stopped every time I heard no, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here, and I certainly wouldn't be doing other things that I've been doing here in Canada, because I've been told no an awful lot, and I'm just, I don't know, I have an idea. And sometimes the idea falls flat, or people actually mean no and can't make it. But other times, no is the easy thing to say. No, I can't do that. I'm too busy. I'm like, well, we're all busy. I'm going to try and wear you down. And I was very happy. I got to say, I was very fortunate to have you come and be a part of the first ever Cornerstone Forum. I thought it was a very big success. I've learned a lot of lessons. And, to have people come in from all over the planet, you certainly added to that. And the guests that came the farthest last year were all North America, minus the speakers, obviously. But we had...
Alex Craner made a solid effort. I think
yes, he did. And missed his flight.
Yeah.
Yes. We're not going to make that mistake. Yeah, again. But for people who came, there's people who drove 28 hours. There was people who flew from, New Jersey and Arizona and on the list went. And the thing about Lloyd is, the reason why everybody says it's 2 hours east of the edge of the world is because through COVID, we used to have like international airports everywhere. Saskatoon and Saskatchewan is an international airport, and Calgary and Edmonton, and you get kind of get the point. And then through COVID, they went to hubs. So Western Canada had, I think, Vancouver and Calgary. Well, that's great if you're in Calgary, but if you're not in Calgary, I'm 5 hours away. So then, as COVID started to lessen off, a few of the airports started to open back up. But as Mikkel's experience, and certainly Alex Craner has experienced firsthand, it's like you fly in, and then from Calgary, if you get there on a direct flight, then you got to go to Edmonton, and then you get picked up to Edmonton, then you got to drive 3 hours, and you're like, where am I going? And that's me. I'm sitting out in the middle of nowhere, and hopefully made an impression. Obviously, being on this side, I hope I did. I certainly enjoyed having you, and your expertise, what you offer the conversation and your perspective is just rare, at least from, I've done 778 or something episodes now, Mikkel, and I just haven't found many Mikkels. So that's why the offer was there. That's why I tried so hard, and I'm glad I wore you down and you came this side.
It was I had a lot of fun when I got there, but just trekking it up there and going that journey, and it was like 24 hours from Panama to get over there. But there was lots of cool people there. It was actually neat too because I had you put me in a very good table for the event. I mean, I was speaking, I was up on stage 4 times, but I had an amazing table, and there was, I don't know, 15 people at the table, 12 people at the table, and they had all drove in to see me. So I had people coming up to me, and they knew my work, and they were really excited to meet me. And so that was fantastic. And then Tom Bodrovics was there, like another one of my favorite human beings on planet Earth. I just get a tap on the shoulder while I'm sitting down having lunch, and I turn around and Tom Bodrovics is there. What the, like, he wasn't even a speaker. He was just an attendee there. So you had some really fantastic people at the event. I was well impressed, actually, especially that you just dragged them out to the middle of nowhere. Like,
Well, I'm a firm believer in, if you build it, they will come. The Kevin Costner, the Field of Dreams. What's so special about Austin, Texas? No offense, Austin, Texas. I'm sure you got lots going on there. But Joe Rogan's there, and I'm sure it's got a bunch of different things. But for me to get there, if I was just going to visit, like it's an effort. And when things matter, when it means something to you, you're gonna make the effort to go. And so to me, I want to build something that's worth the effort. And this was the a different iteration, because I've hosted lots of live events now, but this was certainly my first attempt at a conference, and like trying to draw people out to Lloydminster, which I realize Lloydminster is not Miami. It's not, the Bahamas. It's not this destination. It's literally a blue collar working town. And yet I want to put it on the map for being a place where intellectual discussions happen. And, like this community that's formed through COVID and probably before that can show up, and it doesn't matter what table you sit at, you're going to have an excellent time, because all these people are, it's like it's this eclectic group of human beings that show up to this, and they're all open for a discussion, and they all want to start to understand, how the world's working, what's coming next, and then like businesses run into each other, and they're like, oh, you do that, and they want to work together. It's been really fun to watch, to be honest.
well, I was wild too because the caliber of the people were really fantastic. Like when I tried to describe it to other clients and friends, and where I was going, I'm like, well, they're paying to fly me in and covering all my expenses because there's some really wild stuff going on in Canada, my home and native land, and they need help, and they need an expert to come in. And we came in, and it was like landowners, like you introduced me to one of the largest landowners in the entire province, I think it was. I met family office people from the East Coast, like lots of business owners, and people who are running normal businesses, but like quite substantial, large, multi-million dollar family run businesses. So there was some great people.
Well, one of the things I don't know, I kind of get harassed on both sides. The establishment, if you will, the kind of mainstream, give me a hard time because I'm kind of like tinfoil hatty, and don't go along with the government narrative. But then the far side of that kind of is annoyed by me because I don't go too far, and so I've been told I'm kind of a bridge between the two worlds. And what happens is there's a ton of business people, successful business people, that it just fits in this nice niche for them. We see what's going on. We don't believe every conspiracy, but we certainly agree The conspiracies have been coming up almost like bing, that was check. Well, that was right. That was right. And so, I try and bring in a healthy dialogue on the podcast. You were just on. And before that was retired Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Murray, and before that was a small farmer talking about his story on how he met God. Like to me, it's a healthy balance of life, trying to bring in interesting conversations, and then at times, like you bring up Canada. Like I mean, at times Canada is just such a tire fire. Even if I did 50 shows a week, I couldn't keep up with the stupidity and absolute insanity that's happening in our country almost on a daily basis, if not even shorter than that, on an hourly basis.
Well, and that's what I want to discuss with you today.
Sure.
We kind of jumped in the middle, but like what the hell is going on in Canada these days? Like, just when you think the craziness can't get any more crazy, it does. Like, give us a bit of a breakdown. What is happening there?
So, like, you have Freeland step down. Chrystia Freeland is like, I don't know, Justin Trudeau's right hand woman, right? Deputy Prime Minister, and she was Minister of Finance, and so they had their fall economic report coming out. They thought it was going to be a $40 billion deficit. Turned out it was 60 some, and then they got a whole bunch of other things going on tax wise. Was once again is your world, and you just realize they're doing a horrendous job. I don't know if you needed to see the numbers to know that. You could just look around and see that. And so it just culminates in like that was shocking. The fact that one of his inner circle would be like very publicly, I'm done. And then nobody want to take up that job, Minister of Finance, to announce like they got a deficit, and which is just like the state of Canada. It's almost comical. It's like we're at the circus, and they all keep hopping out of the car, all the clowns, and you're like, when does this end? And just recently, Justin Trudeau made a huge press conference. He's going to resign, and then he says, "I intend to resign." Which, I mean, in all intents and purposes, is pretty much him resigning, except he's still prime minister. And you're like, so now you got a guy, I don't know, your listeners can probably remember a job they worked, Mikkel, where they didn't really like it, or maybe they did, but they knew the end was coming. And now they've said, I'm done. But I'm going to hold on until we get a new leader. So I just want everybody to think about how poor of a job they did in that last month, that last 6 months. Because, I mean, the election's going to be called before October, but in the meantime, we have Justin Trudeau while we wait for a new Liberal leader. And, he then prorogued government until March 24th. So you got nothing passing. You got nobody doing anything in government in the federal side. And it just goes on and on. Fire away with questions. I'll try and maybe make it a little more clear, but it's a tire fire up here.
Well, one of the first things that I would like to point out is that Canada should actually be one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We have all the natural resources there. We have massive deposits of oil and gas. We've got mining, timber, anything and everything that you could possibly want for natural resources are in that country. But they shoot themselves in the foot with bad policies and make it prohibitive to actually use any of these types of resources. We're at 40 some odd million people in a country which is bigger than the United States, bigger than Brazil, bigger than China. No people there, and we can't export the stuff, and then somehow we have massive deficits everywhere, massive national debt. Like, makes no sense.
Yeah, we're what everybody wants. We have unlimited land almost. You got this tiny little population on top of every mineral under the sun. Just like take your pick. It's sitting here, and we get in our own way. Socialist country, essentially, right? Like everything's gonna be free, and everybody loves that. I don't know about you. You left a long time ago, right? I mean, obviously we've chatted about that on my side, but like sitting here as a younger guy, I remember thinking, oh, free healthcare, what a great idea. Now they want free childcare. That scares the crap out of me as a father, like free is not free. We're learning that. April 1st, we got the carbon tax goes up again. And like things are already.
Explain the carbon tax, because people always hear about it, but this is like a country who's actually doing it.
Yeah, so it's just it's a tax on anything that emits carbon. So you pay tax on your heating your home, on your fuel, so your gas. Now let's go back to the size of our country. How do we get all of our goods across the country? Not magic. It's largely mainly by trucking. So now you're taxing anything that moves in our country. So goods automatically go up. Well, where does that price go? Doesn't it? Sure, it gets pushed on to the person moving it, but eventually we all know it ends up at the consumer, and that means all of our food's more expensive. Anything that moves is more expensive. Heating your house. Well, they want us to use wind and solar, but in Alberta we all use natural gas, so our cost of food or cost of heating goes up. If you're a farmer, fertilizer, everything, it's going up. And April 1st, it's every year on April 1st. This is no April Fool's joke. I wonder why they picked that date. I'm like, this is insane. Every year it goes up. So every year on April 1st, everything across the board gets more expensive. And so this has been the big push on Pierre Poilievre's, coming to power, we assume, in being the next prime minister of Canada. That's what it certainly looks like. Is his first thing he's going to do is axe the tax. It's like, well, yeah. I mean, or we got this tiny population, this giant landmass, and somehow we're billed by our own leaders. I don't think anyone else in the world is saying it, that we're like destroying the world. We're the worst human beings ever. We have to switch to wind and solar. Wait a second. I just had minus 28 Celsius here the other day. I'm like, so how am I going to heat my house? Or do you just want us to die? Is that what we're going to do? So you have like this insanity just seeped into Canada politics, Canada ideologies, these different left-leaning groups. And it just doesn't make any sense. Like Alberta, the superpower of natural resources, last winter, almost this time exactly, had brownouts. We had a emergency alert go out. Everybody stopped using power immediately. We're running out. And you go, well, why is that? Well, simple math is we're removing the things that give us continuous power. We're going to things that are intermittent. And like this DEI world, this we're gonna save the planet and we're gonna do it this way. Meanwhile, they don't see the red flags that are happening everywhere, and we've seen them here, even in one of the strongest resource, just rich provinces, not only in Canada but the world, and we're seeing brownouts here.
It's completely ridiculous. Like, I used to think a lot of these things was just stupidity and ignorance. Now I don't believe that anymore. I actually think it's by design. I think that it would literally be impossible to make so many bad decisions just by mistake. Like, I think it's purposefully trying to bankrupt and corrupt things. Like, it's pure
Well,
evil.
that's why I always have different people on my side, because like when you're living it, you're like, oh, maybe it's not as bad as you think it is, right? And then you bring on people from outside the country, outside the province, all over the place, and you start to go, I don't know, smells like a duck, walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And like Canada was a great nation. Everybody knows it. Everybody, for the most part, by now knows about Agenda 2030, knows about all these different things coming in. And you go, it feels like it's by design. We all know Justin Trudeau is a lackey of the WEF, right? Like, I mean, and at this point, if you even are, I don't think I have to tell that your community. I think that your community probably sees it for what it is. It's probably Canadians that still wrestle. Well, it can't be that bad. I mean, it's that bad.
It's
As simple
syndrome.
as it's that bad. Yes.
It's Stockholm syndrome through and through and through. I mean, this is well documented by psychiatrists, psychologists. It's Stockholm syndrome. They don't want to believe what's going on, and then they sympathize with their oppressors, with their abusers, and this is what you get. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and they just keep pushing them further and further and further. And people are having breaking points. By the way, this is like a lot of people have left. Like, we were just chatting, before, and I would say 20% of my audience is Canadian, but 50% of my client base is Canadian. So it's like you have the US, which is 10 times the population size, still only makes up the same amount as the Canadians. So that's a higher percentage of Canadians who are leaving because of this weird, wacky stuff that they're doing in the country.
Well, that audience that you stood in front of in Lloydminster, I'm going to argue out of the 250 people that showed up, we're going to say 246 of them were Canadian. Now, am I off by a couple? You get the point. And of the 246 Canadians in there, I'm going to say 243 of them have contemplated leaving Canada at varying degrees. Even if they're like, I'm never leaving, they've contemplated it. One of the stories I tell is part of a book club. Part of the story of the podcast getting started is a group of myself and 4 other men started a book club. This is back in 2018. And in the darkest days of COVID, right before they said you couldn't, well, they'd already put it out. On this date, you can't leave the country if you're not vaccinated. And on that day, or about 2 days before, we met out in the middle of nowhere, no phones, and we all had this conversation. And when I tell that story, I'll get because my listenership is very engaged in my in the podcast and the different guests I bring on. The amount of people that text me saying they did the same thing or similar things or had their plan B or had they're gonna pay for a ticket onto a boat and the boat's gonna take them here. They got this exit point in Alberta or they got this private plane. Like there's been a ton of energy sunk into how to escape Canada. And when I say that, I'm like, I almost stopped to just think about that because it was only 10 years ago. I would say just before Justin Trudeau got in, nobody. I mean, okay, a small percentage, 1%, less than that, were ever thinking about leaving Canada because they thought it was going to be this tyrannical place that they could no longer live in and be who they are. And here we are in 2025 now. And I would say the brain drain, the economic like flow out of this country has been insane. I know way too many people now that have left or are contemplating leaving. And I mean, some of that's come from or has gone through you, I'm quite sure. But it's just been wild to watch, in my short lifetime, the direction a country can head. At times it feels like, oh, it isn't that fast. But when you look at a life, like over a 9-year stint of Justin Trudeau, I guess soon to be 10, that 1 decade, like he's taken Canada from one of the greatest nations under the sun who got along with everybody to the laughing stock of the entire world.
Yeah, legit. And I think I was looking at some statistics the other day, and it was talking about basically racism, hate crime, all of these types of things before he got in and after he got in. Like when he got in, he started with all these little subgroups and, trying to celebrate all these different holidays and all these things, going with the Sikhs and with their dress and with this group and their dress and another one and like all of their outfits and things like that. And he starts telling all these Canadians that they're so racist and there's all these horrible things and these hate crimes. We have to be more inclusive, more inclusive, more inclusive. And now you look around and it's like the opposite. Like it's gotten 1,000 times worse. Like we saw the same thing with Obama, by the way, when he got in. Like I didn't think of the US as a racist place whatsoever. And after him beating the drum nonstop about how racist it is, that's like what they created there. That was like that's also by design. And we saw it with Justin Castro. Like, I mean, he came in and put all of these things in place. But I never grew up in a country and thinking that it was racist. Like, that's so weird for me. So weird.
Yeah, well, I think Canadian values up until Trudeau was in was like, honestly, was Christian values, right? Like, honestly, it was, people will break it down a whole bunch of different ways, but it was basically be kind to your neighbor, right? Treat them as you want to be treated. And certainly, was there some nefarious characters in there? Yeah. Was there people who didn't like the First Nations? Yes, for sure. I mean, like you can go anywhere in the world, and there's going to be people who treat other human beings awfully. I mean, I don't think you can name one place under the sun that doesn't happen. It's impossible. Human beings are very flawed and are very different across the globe. But like, once again, growing up in Canada, people will point, well, there wasn't that many of X in Canada. It's like, okay, I don't know what to say about that. Right? Like, I mean, a good immigration policy, does it just open the borders and let everybody in? No, that would be a poor choice. We're seeing it in the United States. We're seeing it here in Canada. Just from a simple thing. Like as a person, what do you need? A little bit of money in your pocket, but certainly a roof over your head. Well, the last stat I heard on Canada, this is like, okay, so before Justin Trudeau came into power, right around that time, we were building one home for every 1.4 people, roughly. You kind of get the point. Okay, it's pretty close. Now, for every one person, we're yeah, for every 5 people, one home. So you think about that and you go, the housing shortage here in Canada is insane. Like Justin Trudeau just announced the other day that they're putting in new laws so that they can basically change how Airbnb works, because he looks at it and goes, there's 200,000 homes right there. We can put people in them. And it's like, yeah, but that's somebody bought that. Somebody has a business model around that. Like that's, I can get
Someone's
that somebody doesn't want to live, somebody doesn't want to live by a party house. I get that. So I get that. But we're going to all of a sudden just change what you're going to do with people's private property. I'm like, oh man, this is like, that's just Canada. His ideas are not well thought out. And he just continues to destruct, Canada every single day. He can't get out of office soon enough. And, Pierre Poilievre, I think, is going to be the next prime minister. That's what it certainly looks like. And from what I've heard, you can have an election here as early as probably the end of April. That's what it's kind of trending to. But then it's like, okay, so Pierre gets in, and how long does it take to undo what has been done? If at all possible, Mikkel, like, is it possible to take back everything that's went on in a decade? I highly doubt it.
I highly doubt it. I mean, talk about drain the swamp. I mean, that would need to be done at a massive level. And like we talked about it the other day on your program, and I just don't know if Canadians are ready for a lot of the pain. If they want to balance the budget, if they want to, make all these changes. Like I think the psychological damage that's been done to Canadians over the last, 5 to 10 years is really severe. Like I think that there are some serious psychological problems that are now in our society that I don't think people are ready to deal with whatsoever. And I don't think one man is going to be able to one man, one woman is going to be able to come in and fix that at all.
I don't know. You tell we were talking about this too. Like the only two that I've seen in recent history, and maybe a third, I don't know. But for sure, from my eyes, Bukele, Malay, they've really come in. But look at what their stations were sitting at. I mean, El Salvador was the most dangerous place on the planet, pretty much. And I mean, Malay walked into, I mean, what was their inflation at? I can't even remember the
hundreds of percent. And
right.
It was.
So you want to talk about pain?
Yeah. But those are so different situations, because I think that a lot of Canadians just like, they're still the frog in the pot of boiling water. Like
yes.
they are not ready for any of this stuff. They haven't been mentally prepared. They don't understand it. Like El Salvadorians understood how dangerous their country was. And when Bukele came in there and arrested everyone with a face tattoo, like he had the support of everybody else to make this happen. And it was a small country, and he took control of the military, and they acted fast, and they did this. In Argentina, it's a completely different story. It's a massive country, massively natural resource, but the inflation was out of control. They had dozens of ministries that did nothing, and it was just like everybody was on the company dole. Like it was just a completely socialist country. And he came in and said, I'm going to take a chainsaw to all of it, to the entire establishment. I am going to burn it down, and from the ashes I will build something else. And that's what he's done. And he's getting pushback all the time. And there's protests on the street. And there's all these university students who come from the left who don't get it. And it's, very, very, very difficult. I think Canada will get a lot worse before they're going to look at such drastic things. If, anyone comes in, tries to do such drastic stuff right now, Canadians won't be prepared for it. And, it's going to be like a Liz Taylor in the UK. He's going to be there for a couple of weeks and then out.
I want to get your thoughts, because one of the conversation topics right now is what Trump's saying about, I mean, not only Canada, other parts, right? I mean, his son literally landed in Greenland. What was that, the other day? And you're like, holy crap. I can't figure out if he's just messing with the media because they know they're going to grab onto that. And he's the ultimate businessman. He's making deals and everything else. We were having a pretty interesting discussion this morning about it, because, I think Canadians, there's a lot of Canadians that are torn right down the middle. Some are like, we're never going to become America. That's a terrible idea. And others are like, no, I welcome it. Donald Trump can come annex us tomorrow and I'd be happy with it. And I'd be curious your thoughts sitting on the other side of the planet. Well, not the other side of the planet, but like just on the outside of hearing that.
So, geez, you know, it's one of these things that, yes, I was born a Canadian citizen. I'm 42 soon. I left at 17. I've spent the majority, well, my entire adult life, but better part of my life overseas. So I don't think, like, I don't feel patriotic whatsoever. I just never really been my thing. I think that if you had asked people 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have been like 100% no, not a chance. We would never want to be part of the United States. The fact that you're saying that you're talking to fellow Canadians and they're actually split on a decision like that really shows you how far things have changed.
And I might add, the people that are split aren't people that aren't paying attention. And these aren't people that are just like heard it for the first time. Oh yeah, I just go whatever. These are people like the first time it got said, they thought Trump was joking, right? And the second time it got said, they're like, he's making fun of Justin Trudeau, great thing. And then Justin Trudeau steps down, right? Like really applaud. And then the last time when the reporter's asking, and for your audience that I guess I'll fill in. He got asked by a reporter about using military force on Canada, like to take it. And he said, oh no, I'd never do that. But we could have economic, and I forget if he says warfare, but essentially economic sanctions, bring them to their knees. And, and then they basically come to us. Because he's like, we got all the trees in the world. We got all the energy in the world. We got all the milk in the world. And I'm like, you sound like an idiot right now. I don't agree with anything you just said. But I know you're a business guy, and I'm starting to take you way more seriously now that this continues to be a thread that Donald Trump is doing. And probably what pains me more is our leader right now, even though he's intending to resign, is Justin Trudeau. And I'm like, man, if you're going to fleece a guy on a deal, Justin Trudeau is probably it. Like, I mean, you would love to show up to a deal and be like, that's who I'm going to deal with? That's who I'm going to be in a boxing match with is Justin Trudeau? Old fancy socks? All right, let's do this. So people who are in the conversation, who are paying attention, it started out as, I think, just kind of like a joke. And he's toying, and he's just gaslighting Trudeau or whatever, trolling him. Now I'm like, I'm not so sure anymore. And the plane landing in Greenland, I'm like, that could be the ultimate move in 3D chess, or he could be signaling he's like really serious.
I think a lot of people assume, and I probably one of them, that he is trolling. Like, he is a master at taking control of mainstream media and getting his headline. And he always has been, by the way. He developed this skill decades ago, long before he was president or president-elect. Like, if you look at old documentary footage of him and him talking to mainstream media, about real estate projects and things from the 80s, like 80s and 90s, it's wild. Like, he is so good at it, and he just comes up with this completely wacky stuff, and people just kind of go like, I don't know, is he being serious or not being serious? But it makes it all over mainstream media, and I think he just thrives on it. I also watched a really funny meme the other day, and it was talking about how Canada, the United States, and Mexico could come together and form one country. Canada, United States, Mexico, CUM. So come to the new country, and we'll take over the rest of the world. Come this and come that. And I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. And I was dying, but I digress. Yeah.
Come on over, folks. It's great over here.
Another well thought out acronym. Excellent, guys.
Oh man. Yeah. I think it's a terrible idea. I do. I'm the opposite way. I would really prefer, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, once again, the things that came up this morning is like, there's some laws in the United States I would welcome tomorrow, but I am not a fan of bigger government, of the CIA, of the deep state. Yes, we have our own here in Canada. I get it. But you got the Clintons, you got the Obamas, you got the whole Democratic machine that just is insane to watch from a Canadian perspective. And that's been interesting to watch here, and maybe even more to watch Canadians that I respect, who are in the know, who are paying attention to politics, actually have a really interesting debate about it. And once again, what does Donald Trump do? It's like he just adds a little gas to the fire. He sends his son to Greenland. I'm like, you think he just paid? Like, I'm curious. You think he just paid whatever it is to get his jet down there? Is it I don't know, $100,000, $20,000? Doesn't matter the number. I'm like, you think he's just like, this is gonna be great because they're gonna talk about this and they're gonna talk about it around the world that we're coming for Greenland, and maybe they are. I have no idea. I look at that and I'm like, I wonder if there's anybody even on the plane. They just land, get the screenshot, turn around, and off they go again.
I went to Greenland when I was living in the Canadian high Arctic. The Greenlandic Parliament was coming over to Ottawa for meetings. This was back in 2018 or 20, no, no, 2019, 20, no, no, 2009, excuse me, 2009. And they brought them over to Ottawa, and then they stopped in Iqaluit, where I was living at that time. And we chartered the Greenlandic Airlines plane and flew over to Nuuk, to the capital of Greenland. And we arrived, and there was no police or immigration or border agents or anything. So we just kind of like waited around for half an hour and like, all right, never mind. So we just went into the country without a stamp or anything like that. Spent a week doing cruises around the icebergs and all these things, and then took the flight back and went back to Iqaluit. Yeah, that was 16 years, 17 years ago or something like that. But yeah, there's not a lot up there whatsoever. Very beautiful, but not a lot going on.
I've heard great things about it. You assume it's just the strategic location of what Greenland represents more than anything, right? Like, there's a lot of talk from, all the world powers right now about the North. So it's been, I would say, heating up, and maybe it's been red hot for a long time, but certainly there's been a lot of talk to the North or about the North.
See, my perspective is, as a libertarian, I want small government, like as small as humanly possible. Like, let's go all the way down, forget about the country or the state or the provincial or the municipal. Like, let's go down to the individual. Like, we should have 7 billion different countries on here. Like, everybody should be able to determine, as long as you're not hurting other people, as long as you're not, infringing on other people's rights. I want you to have absolute maximum power and maximum autonomy over your own body and your life. Like, I do a lot of the work with the Free Cities Project and with Tipolis and with these kinds of guys, where we would do private cities that are separate. You start studying a lot about the Venetians and different city states throughout history. I lived in Singapore. I lived in lots of other small countries. I live in Panama, which is a full-size country, but with the majority of the people being in Panama City proper. Um, I wouldn't want to see the US double in size and then start adding in Greenland and Mexico and stuff like that. This reminds me of, what was it, Brave New World, where there was basically three governments around the world, and then that was
Yes.
it, and they all just vilify each other. And like,
Well,
this
I think
wasn't
I
an
think it's
instruction
I think it's
manual,
a,
guys. Please, let's not do that.
somebody can look me up on this. I was about to say fact check. Sorry, folks, I'm not going to do that. But somebody can definitely look into it to make sure I'm not wrong, which is a fact check. But either way, um, Agenda 2030, they want less countries. They want, continent. If you want a one world government, then you don't want 200 plus countries. You want seven. Wouldn't that be easier? And I actually can see how their mindset on that. Oh, this would be way easier. And I'm like, oh man, can you imagine a group of people coming together to exercise their rights and demonstrate against the government of well, the cum nation? I mean, you should have never told me that. That's terrible. But I mean, people from Mexico and the drug cartels coming up to meet the Canadian truckers and land with the American patriots. That would be one heck of a shindig.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about like a Texas, Florida secession type of thing. And it's like, all
Sure.
right, California, Washington, Oregon, you guys go one way, and like, let's divvy up the United States in a couple of different countries. I was like, that sounds rad. Like, you know, I think that, people who believe in a certain ideology, or the blue people, they can go over here, the red people can go over there. And if you want to live amongst, a mix, well, there'll be one of those as well, because I think reconciling in the United States is extremely difficult. I can't imagine any of the liberals are very happy with Trump right now. And are not really looking forward to a lot of these ideas. So it's like, let's just get a divorce.
Same thought process has been put out in Canada, right? A Western Canada and Eastern Canada.
Let's do it.
Like whether or not that could ever happen, I don't know. But it's certainly, you want to do all the wacky ideas that are going on in Canada right now. From MAID to like free drugs, right? And um, pronouns, and I mean we can just get into all the societal problems Canada has. But like if Eastern Canada wants it all, then just have it, and we'll just be something different over in West where we just don't want that. And if you want to go over there and do those things, great. We don't care. There's just a growing population that definitely doesn't want it. And the issue when you only have one federal government that is calling the shots. I mean, you get what you get, right? Like one of the cool things about watching the United States is it looks to me like each state has just a little bit more independence. And in the provinces, we at times can exercise it, but you got to have a politician that really wants to do that. Otherwise, like we just follow along with whatever the leader of the federal government is talking about. It's been a really interesting thing to watch. I was in a political junkie 6 years ago when I first started podcasting. Certainly, I've become a bit of that, and there's a lot of learning to do to understand how a political system works. I grew up in a hockey world, so when you ask me about the NHL playoffs and who I think is going to win, or maybe the World Juniors or the World Cup or anything to do with the NHL hockey, how it works, the inner dynamics of all the different leagues, all the way down to knee-high kids, I'm like, I completely understand. But like when it comes to politics, even with him walking in and stepping down, like I want your audience to think about this. This just shocks me. So he's intending to resign. I'm going back to Trudeau. Like, okay, that may, all right, sure. And now they're going to have a liberal leadership race. Two of the people which it sounds like are going to run are not MPs, which means they're not an active government. And they could win. And if they win, Mikkel, they will be the leader of the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister of Canada without being able to sit in government. Do that math for me and make it make sense. And yet, that is Canadian politics. That might be a ton of places. And I'm realizing my audience, because I didn't come from this land of politics. I came from the land of sports, and specifically here in Canada, hockey, like know the ins and outs of pretty much every trade that's happened in the last 30 years. Or at least I know people who do. And I'm learning. And I see Canada as a society learning as well, trying to get caught back up on how their politics actually work so they can push on the buttons to make sure our leaders do the right things. And I see that happen. Like, that's my positive here. The positive on Canada is there's a lot of pissed off people that aren't leaving, they're staying, and they're engaged, and they're learning how things work, learning the basically the terminology of how all these different things work and what they actually mean. And that's really messed up. And they're trying to enact change. Now, whether they can do that over the course of the next year, 10 years, maybe longer, we'll wait and see. But certainly that's the positive. People are engaged, and more every single day.
Do you think that for someone to make a positive change, they need to be physically located in Canada and actually like be under the thumb of the government? Like, don't you think that people can leave, regroup from a place of strength and affect change?
Certainly. You look at Tucker Carlson, Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk, probably those three in particular. There's probably more. Joe Rogan, anytime he mentions Canada. I mean, heck, South Park. They can highlight an issue, but it still takes boots on the ground to get it to go the right way. So Tucker Carlson came here, I think it's about a year ago, and brought up with Premier Danielle Smith about the Coots 4 and just brought it up. And he didn't know most of the story, but all of a sudden, a big spotlight went on to what the heck is he talking about? And Jordan Peterson with the pronouns, right? He's living in Florida now. It sounds like he's going to be officially like living there. I don't know if it's citizenship or not, but regardless, he's going to be down there. And he highlights Canada all the time. He just had Pierre Poilievre, which, garnered a crazy amount of attention because he's hooked into the Elon Musk, et cetera, et cetera. So absolutely people can leave and have effect, but it's still going to take boots on the ground, people living there, paying their taxes, fighting for their everyday life in order to continue to move the change where it needs to go.
How do you think paying your taxes is going to help you affect change? You're just feeding the beast.
No, I guess to me, the paying the taxes isn't when I say what I was thinking of with paying the taxes is like, so getting on a board and enacting change. So, you know, when it came to COVID, there was certain things that you started to see were the pressure points in Canada and in my community where 7 people all of a sudden had a lot of power. And you're like, huh, didn't see that coming. And you think if you controlled 4 of them, or not even controlled, just 4 of them had the right mindset, not a big deal. They voted down everything. They did the right things. But we learned really quickly here in Canada that was not the case. And so if you're gonna, truly change a country, I guess paying the taxes is you're going to be there and you're probably paying taxes. Can you be in Panama and be on the local school board or the local sports board or the local be a city councilor and these types of kind of like unglorified positions, truthfully?
From my side, the way that I've always thought about it is that our first responsibility is to our family. So I want to protect my kids and I want to get my kids out of harm's way. So I would rather get them out of this Stockholm syndrome abusive relationship with the government, have them in a free and clean place. Don't support the enemy by paying taxes legally. Everything I'm talking about is legal. And then
Yes.
if you want to affect change, you can do so from a place of strength, not a place where they're trying to bankrupt you at every minute and freezing bank accounts and calling you a
Sure.
racist and slandering you and not allowing you to see mainstream or media from outside of the country or alternative media or this online harm acts for children and this all this censorship that we saw happening in Canada, which we haven't even got into, which is a huge story on its own. I mean, I would rather get out of all of that kind of stuff. And then if you want to affect things, you can do so in a place of strength.
Yeah, it's one of the I don't disagree with what you're talking about. I just look at our 2 lives as it sits, and we both taken different paths. There's nothing, it's just that's what it is.
Of course.
And I look at it and I go, by staying in Canada, we paint a picture of like everybody's walking around and there's a, forgive me, folks, but like there's a tranny sitting over there and they're dressed in drag and they're talking to kids, and then somebody's being offered MAID over there and pedophiles over here, and the medical system's a tire fire, and it's I can walk out my door right now. It's a beautiful place. There's lots going on here. And when it comes to family first. I 100% agree. You need a strong marriage, in my opinion. And then that is going to help protect your kids. Education, we talked about this on ours when you were on my side. Homeschooling or your choice of school. One of the ladies that I'm bringing to the next Cornerstone Forum is Kaylin Ford. She's the founder of Alberta Classical Academy. And so in Alberta, you have educational choice of where you put your kids. So some of these ideas are absolutely asinine. I would want my kids nowhere near this. And as parents, you have to, no matter if you're where Mikkel is, where I'm sitting, you have to put that foot forward at all times. You have to be the leader of your house. You have to make the choices that make the most sense for you and your family. You have to protect them. And as far as Canada goes, I just go, if we all leave, and this might not be the right statement. Me and you had this chat like a year ago. If we all leave, does Canada get better? The answer is no, it does not. I don't care what anyone says. Now, does it need to get better? That's a different question, right?
Do you
does
have
it
a
need
responsibility to be the one to make it better?
That's right. But my story is in the middle of COVID, I'm doing a podcast and I'm interviewing. And if you're not a sports fan, I apologize for, I'm going to rattle off some names and you're going to know them or not know them. But like, I'm interviewing Don Cherry and Ron McLean. I'm interviewing Paul Bissonnette from Spit and Chicklets, Glenn Sather, who had his banner retired in Edmonton Oilers. These are huge hockey names. And then 2021, I'm just dragging my feet because I don't want to talk about it. And finally, I'm like, are we going to talk about this? Or are we not going to talk about this? And so I started talking about it, and then I got a ton of flack. And then I went, listen, folks, I'm not going to talk anything but COVID until we're out of COVID. Now here I am 4 years later, and I haven't gone back to hockey. I'm talking to Mikkel Thorup instead of, I don't know, Wayne Gretzky or whoever, right? And I just go, if I hadn't have done that, there's a chance somebody else would have. And there were other people doing it. But I certainly know the ripple effect I had by starting to do it, just by the people who've reached out, the rooms I've been put in. Like as it sits today in a court case, my podcast is being referenced, which is really strange. But people are facing consequences for the actions they took at Coots and in Ottawa. And do I side with them? Yeah, like almost 100%. Yes, I went to Ottawa and witnessed the Freedom Convoy. But that's my path. And every day I think about it, like, do you leave? Do you go somewhere else? And I'm like, I really, really love this community. And if I come to wherever I go, my wife's from Minnesota. If I went to Minnesota, I'd try and do the same thing in Minnesota. And probably what's going to happen is I'm disagreeable and I'm probably not going to like things. I'm probably going to start talking about them. I'm probably going to ruffle some tail feathers. And so I go, why not ruffle the tail feathers in the country that I love, in the province that I've grown to love, in the community that I know like is the most beautiful place, even though it's 2 hours east of the edge of the world. This place is worth fighting for. And I and at any point, if my kids come in the crossfire of that, I'm going to have a very different choice to make. But right now, my wife and I continue to make choices to shield them from the insanity of the world. And I would say the community helps protect what I do by shielding me from some of the insanity of the world. And it's I don't know if that answers it, but certainly you can go anywhere in the world and talk about any issue and still be very effective. Just look at Elon Musk berating Great Britain right now. That's pretty wild to watch, and he's having an effect for certain. He is. So there, I just all of us have different paths to take. Is I guess my
100%.
long-winded answer.
No, I love it. I 100%. Like, I never try to convince anybody of anything. I try to present things. I try to present alternatives. This is my opinion. This is the way that I see the world. This is what I've learned of 25 years of exploration around the planet. And then, I just invite people. Like, if you're on my newsletter at expatmoney.com, or, I'll just say, like, here, I'm inviting you to this. Come down, take a look around, have a look and see if what I'm saying is true. Is it not true? Make up your own mind. And it's a standing on invitation. Like, I would love to host you down here in Panama. I'd love for you to take a look around, see what it's like.
And in fairness, I want to come. Like the thing about it is I may be Shaun in 5 years, looking back on this Shaun, arguing with you right now, or having a discussion and being like, it's completely wrong, or it's completely right, or it doesn't matter. Because one of the reasons I brought you was people wanted that answer. They wanted that option. I'm a guy about options. I think your idea of plan B is brilliant. You should always have options. If you don't have options, that's how you're going to get, in the last couple of years, in the darkest sense, a lot of people who did things against their will, and I'm talking about the mandates in Canada, did so because they didn't think they had any options. Right. They held their job over their head and they had no option. And so they went and they got it and they've regretted it, or they've had medical consequences because of it. And so I'm all about options. And I love the plan B. The plan B makes complete sense to me. As stalwart I am, if all of a sudden I looked out my window and the CIA, please CIA, not, I know you, like, regardless, I joke a little bit, but like if all of a sudden I looked out and they were ready to take me away in a black bag, I think my tune would change a little bit. I can easily say that. But I don't know, Mikkel. I'm right now where I sit, I see a lot of hope in Canada. It doesn't mean there isn't going to be ridiculously tough times. They're coming, and we're probably right in the middle of it.
I mean, the message that I have is very succinct, and through all of this, everybody needs to protect their downside. That's all I'm asking. Protect your downside, have a plan B, have something in place, especially if you are going to be an outspoken podcaster like yourself, or if you're looking at succeeding, Alberta succeeding from the rest of the country, or business owners who are not going to follow mandates or anything like this, or you're going to make a big stink in politics. You better have a backup plan, because if they come for you, You want you want somewhere you can go. You need bank accounts. You need
I was
access to funds. You need like you need a residency, a passport. Like have that stuff, and then you know if you're gonna do all of this stuff, then at least do it from a place of strength. That's all I'm.
I
That's all I'm
agree.
talking about.
Listen, I this is why we get along so well is because of what you're talking. I agree about it. I just had a guy on the podcast. Well, actually, it comes out I think just after this, but regardless, it's coming out on the podcast right away. And Larry, and I'm forgetting his last name. That's terrible. He spent 30 years, or has spent 30 years, of Larry Hancock. He spent 30 years writing books about JFK, the assassination of him. And the last one he's written is about Lee Harvey Oswald. And I don't know. I'm sure you got listeners who know this story inside and out. I'll be the first to put my hand up and say, folks, I'm interested in all different aspects of society, history, how things work. Obviously, an assassination of a president is a pretty big deal. And he walked me through it. And when you're talking about being an outspoken podcaster, Lee Harvey Oswald was an outspoken, I'm just going to say TikTok influencer, but to put it in today's standards, who was on radio shows before it happened. He was speaking about wanting to get to Cuba back in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He wanted communism. He'd been to Soviet Russia. He'd lived there. He had military background. And from all accounts of what Larry walked me through, he was a sharp individual, which means he was not dumb. But then, the CIA decided they could use him for something, and they started to, not mold him, but encourage him in his thought process. And, then the guy ends up in jail for assassinating the president. Then he ends up dead, and he's gone down as the guy who killed JFK. You can believe or unbelieve everything I just said. All you're saying, and why I bring up the story, is like at no point in time should you not be thinking about options and about being strategic and going like, if I'm going to continue to do this, and I'm talking about myself now, where I continue to call out the insanity of Canada, well, you're probably in a couple crosshairs, Shaun, and maybe you should talk to Mikkel a bit more. And Mikkel, folks, is probably not wrong.
It's one of those things that it's not going to hurt you. There's no downside for any of the stuff that I'm discussing. And when we set up the plan, it should still make good economic sense. Like when we buy a property for someone overseas and have some real estate and things like that, that's cash flowing, that's generating income for you. We're doing it and having the money sit offshore in a company or in a bank account so you have access to credit cards and bank accounts. Yes, you have to disclose things. I'm not talking about doing anything illegal or fraudulent. We're still following all the laws. You still have the right to do all of this stuff. It's just that Canadian government can't get their hands on it, or US government, or whomever, whatever country you're listening to this from today. Just having something on the other side is just always very pragmatic. And even I have this conversation with my team. Like we're a staff of more than 30. And sometimes someone will put something up and it's like, yes, we help expats. And it's like, no, we help anybody. We help anybody to move offshore. If you want to physically relocate and be an expat, amazing. But if you just want a bank account or another piece of real estate or company formation, we can help you with that. You don't physically have to do move anywhere. You can do it from your living room and still reside there for the rest of your life. I just want you to protect your downside. That's all I'm encouraging people to do. And it's like, people who say all these things and do all these things online, and it's like all their eggs in one basket, just makes me so nervous, man. Just so
Yeah.
nervous.
Well, I think, when you talk protect your downside, I just think of, one of the things COVID taught me is I never want to be caught flat footed again like that. And, when I look into the future, I see problems. I see lots of problems. And some of them are going to come to fruition. Some of them are just noise. Some of them are going to come to fruition, but in 10 years, right? Like it's a slow burn to get to it. And that's a lot to wade through. But when you talk about protecting, like to me, I completely get it. It's something that we should all be looking at. And at times we can get paralyzed in like World War III or something like really like huge. Like all of a sudden the world just stops moving. Or, on the prepper side of it, it's like, a big cataclysmic event happens and we're back in the Stone Age. I mean, it all depends on what level you want to go to, but you can just start really simple things and start, how do you eat an elephant? one bite at a time. It's like, how do you start prepping? Honestly, you buy some booster cables. You learn how to use them. It sounds stupid, but that's a form of prepping. You want to do things with Mikkel, or go offshore. You start planning a couple things out, and then you go do it. You learn. Maybe you save some. Maybe you start to invest over here, and over time, I'm learning this isn't a race. Like at times, there's times to run as hard as you can go. Other times, this is a journey. It's a marathon run, and I watch the government just drag things out. And at times we have more time than we give ourselves credit, but we still have to pay attention and be involved, and prepare and protect ourselves, and all these things that we've been talking about.
We try to do proper threat analysis of all of these things because people have different things that they're trying to protect against. Um, but you definitely have to put in one thing, and then we build on that, and we put a second thing and third thing, and you look back because you know my main work is consulting, so that I help families through this, and they all come to me and they're so stressed, so much anxiety, and their shoulders are like all hunched up, and they're not sleeping well at night. And after starting working with me, like their shoulders just kind of come down piece by piece by piece, and then their tone of voice just kind of mellows out. And, they just become a lot more relaxed. And I think that transformation for people and relieving that stress is just so amazing to watch. So that's my encouragement to make sure that you're taking these things seriously. And that's why I wanted to bring you on because, as I was saying to you off air, like I don't follow Canadian politics. I am not a Canadian politics expert. I'm down here on the beaches in Panama City, and going out for nice dinners and Michelin star and going to the beach on the weekend and hanging out with my kids and enjoying my life. Like I don't need to follow everything in Canada, but I hear about all of the craziness because my clients who are still there will send me articles or news or
Sure.
clips or things like that. And I'm just like,
Well,
holy
Mikkel,
moly.
I'm not going to the beach. The other day we went sledding or tobogganing or GTing or whatever, speed racing, whatever you sledding. We went sledding in -20, had a grand old time, had a bonfire, and that like my wife at times come from Minnesota. I mean, they get snow there, but it's always like at least 10 degrees warmer than here. She's like, "Why do we live here again?" I'm like, "Freaking love it." I love the cold. I love that the Freedom Convoy drove across the frozen tundra at probably the worst time ever to drive in Canada. You get like 6 hours of daylight. It's -40 every day. The roads are crap. It's snowing. And yet people, they find a way. We find a way. And yeah, I mean, as far as Canadian politics and being a political nerd, I'm far from it, but I certainly pay attention to it more than most and more than I ever thought. I used to play a little game. I guess I bring it up from time to time, so I shouldn't say I never played anymore, but I used to wonder what it'd be like to go back and talk to myself 5 years before, and then 5 years before that. And I just, I'm always excited now about the future because no matter where the world takes me, no matter where my feet or my family, it's like there's an adventure there. And with the right mindset, no matter how awful this government gets, its time will come and it'll end and we'll be on to the next. And like there's such the world is full of possibilities of where we could go. Like, I mean, look, I got Mikkel Thorup to Lloydminster. I'm like, I wonder who else I can snag to come all the way there, right? And like, truthfully, I see a lot of upside in the future. It doesn't mean there isn't going to be tough days. COVID was tough days, but COVID, the blessing of it was it put me on a completely new path that I did not realize was there, and it's landed me in this seat today and different seats in the future for certain. And so with anytime bad things come, there's also the opposite that's going to be hidden in there, and if you can find it and run with it, I mean, the world can be a pretty spectacular place.
It kind of reminds me, my very good friend Tom Woods, I started talking to him about this stuff maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And he was like, never will I ever leave the States. He like only the US, just loves it there. And every time I talk to him, it's a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And now I'm going to speak at his Tom Woods cruise next month. And, I'm one of the keynote speakers there. And, he's always just a little bit more, seeing things from a
Wouldn't
different
that be
side. So it'll
something?
be interesting. I'm
The
looking forward to.
Cornerstone Forum on a cruise. I don't mind the thought of that.
It'd be
I
fun.
tell you what, I'm open to going anywhere in the world. I love the adventure of traveling, and with a young family, you've given me you've placed in my brain the realization that you can do it with a young family, and I'm like,
Yeah,
for a long time, a little bit more like gun shy of like, oh man, traveling with kids is going to be interesting. Now I look at it more of the adventure and the experience for them, and so I'm open to lots of. Going to lots of different places in the world. I've talked to you lots. I got to go see El Salvador, and at some point, I got to come for a visit in Panama. To me, it's just like you develop these friendships. It's like you should just go see. Right? Like, I mean, maybe the best days
exactly.
are sitting just over the fence or just over a plane ride, and they're right in front of you, and you just got to go find them. And it's very, very possible.
So, speaking about kids and travel, I forgot to tell you this when we were doing, well, when we were on the phone the other day, or when I was on your program. I actually last year took my kids to Northern Cyprus, Turkey, Montenegro, uh, Kosovo, Serbia, no, Slovenia, Bosnia. I took them to like 10 different countries over 5, 6 weeks. Three kids, my wife, my mother, and a nanny. We had the whole crew and like a bus worth of gear, and we drove around the Balkans for like a month and a half. Like it was amazing while homeschooling the kids, and I'm speaking at different conferences and events and stuff, and meeting with lawyers and all these types of things. And it was so much fun. Like it was tiring. It was amazing. But man, if I can do it, you could do it with your three kids.
Yes, hey, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag just yet, but we're working on things for 2026 on my side of things. Not that your audience, maybe there's some people from my audience listening. I'm probably is a little bit of crossover for sure, but there's some things in the works for 2026 in the future of certainly getting abroad and experiencing some things that way, seeing different, like once again, I always come back to why I enjoy having you on and others, I might add, that are in your guest list and from just different walks of life, different parts of the planet, is you see their perspective, and it's just like it's very fascinating, right? If you respect someone and they say things that go counter to what you think, it's like, well, but I respect them. So they're either lying to me, but if that's true, then why am I respecting them, right? And so it's a little bit of a mind game, and eventually you just got to jump the hurdle, I think, and go see it for yourself. Go talk to them, go see what they see, and then you can um, maybe report back on the good news or the things you find along the way.
Exactly. That's all I ever ask. Go and make your own decisions, smell it and feel it and touch it and see it, and you know, and then make your own decisions. That's why I love traveling to all these different places because you hear about other people talk about them, and they're like, "This is the axis of evil, and this is horrible, and blah blah blah." And you go and see it, and you're like, "This is actually really cool. Like, this is tons of history and amazing food and very sweet and down to earth people." And it's like, this isn't at all what I was told it is. Like, I
Well,
just want people to see things
so
for
that's what I
themselves.
think of Canada right now. There's a lot going on bad, but you go to the mountains and you're like, still the mountains. Mountains are
Yeah,
beautiful. But there are some
exactly.
things you're like, that's kind of concerning. And I don't see that everywhere, The fact that MAID is being offered to just like anyone under the sun, and we've
You
become,
better
what is it?
explain what MAIDs is because not everyone is going to know that term. I do, but
Sure.
not everyone else will.
Well, so MAID is medical assistance in dying. Okay. So they're going to help you die, right? It
They had a
started out
hotline.
well, and here's the thing. United States has it in, I believe, certain states, but the one major difference is they can't offer it. You actually have to ask for it. In Canada, they can offer it. So the not the running joke, but certainly you stub your toe, you go in for to get it checked out, and they offer you MAID. Right? It's not that far off. It's a little bit hyperbolic, but it's not that far off. And it started. MAID got brought in under Justin Trudeau right at the start of his reign. It had been pushed for a very long time. I don't want to just make it out that he walked in and that was his idea. It had been pushed for a long time. And so it started out with basically foreseeable death. You're 85 years old. You got stage 4 cancer. Just put me out of my misery. I think don't get me wrong. I understand the arguments of why we should never do that. But I also am like, I get it too, right? I don't know. I get it. But since then, Now you have non-foreseeable death. So like you can be not dying and get it. They've offered it to military vets. I mean, like, is there anything more disrespectful? We had a military guy walk in, want to get help, and they offered him MAID. It's like, what? And so I forget. Like, I think the new stats came out. I think it was 13. Was it 13? I don't want to give the wrong numbers here, Mikkel. I know it was 1,000 roughly the first year, and then by 2022 it was 10,000 people used it. It's now 1 in 20 deaths in Canada are MAID,
Holy
right?
moly.
And so like it's a high number. This isn't
That's
messing around anymore. We've
ridiculous.
become one of the what is it? Because it's eugenics, right? Like you're literally killing
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I forget where we're at on the stat. We're either the number one country in the world now, or we're up there. Once again, I don't want to throw that stat out there and be off on it, but we're high. And like the numbers are just shocking. And probably the more concerning, when we talk about countries and you go and wow, this is beautiful. What's concerning to me is that more people don't find that stat or those numbers or the idea of it like completely asinine. Like this isn't good. And
Gross. I mean, it's disgusting.
Right.
Like
it's insane.
Let's call it what it is. I always heard, and people feel free to fact check me, but I always heard that they had like hotlines so you could call in, like there was like 1-800 numbers about it. Then when there was like on automated phone systems, so it's like push 1 for assistance with this, number 2 for this, number 3, kill yourself. And it was like, whoa, like what is going on here? This is completely bonkers. So you bankrupt people, you separate them from the church, from their family, from society in whole. You shame them. You spend trillions of dollars on brainwashing them and telling them that they're wrong. And then you offer them assisted suicide. And it's like, you guys are pure evil. Like this is
so this
really,
wasn't a
really
thing,
gross stuff.
even when this first came in 2016, I believe. This wasn't like a dinner table type conversation. But the reason it's coming up now is literally this morning at the coffee table, a MAID came up and a guy was talking about his mom, how he went into a local doctor here and had forgive me, is it a kidney infection or a kidney? I want to say kidney infection, like a simple thing. You take a couple of things and over a couple of days it's gone. And literally the doctor's like, would you like MAID? And the nurse is like, doctor, it's a simple kidney infection. He's like, oh yeah, I know, but would you like MAID? Because once again, the patient's in her 70s. And you're like, what is going on? I can't believe that's a common thing.
What's the incentive program or something like that? Like there
Sure.
could be a, like, oh, for every person that you take through this, you get $4,000 or something like that. Like who knows? Like governments come up with weird, twisted, sick incentive programs.
Well, MAID is strange. The free drugs is strange. The pronouns, everything under the sun of that world is strange. And that right now in Canada is the tip of the iceberg. So when you're talking social norms, social, like what people are concerned about, strange. When you look at the land and the area, beautiful. And when you look at certain communities, they're kind of castles being attacked over and over again by insanity. And I feel like the tide is turning, but at the same time, I don't know if it can turn far enough. There's a lot of bad policy that's come in, and I don't know how you undo it. I just don't know how you walk everything back. That might be an impossibility.
John, super interesting conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us. If my audience wants to get a hold of you, if they want to listen to your program, where can we send them?
Sure. If you want to find the Shaun Newman podcast, it's on, X, Spotify, Apple, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and it's pretty easy. Type my name in and, I'm the odd Shaun with the U instead of a W or scene. So it's Shaun with a U. And then the other thing I would just highlight from my end is if you're in Alberta or you're in Canada and you want to have an interesting discussion, you want to see some interesting discussions, obviously can turn it into the podcast. But May 10th in Calgary, Alberta, the second iteration of the Cornerstone Forum is happening. And some of the names that Mikkel brought up are going to be there again. Tom Luongo and Alex Craner, Martin Armstrong. and Tom Bodrovics is going to be one of the co-hosts this year. And so, one of the things we're trying to do is do things differently up here and get those conversations going and bring in an eclectic group of speakers that can really facilitate a healthy dialogue, create some community. And if people are interested in that, head to my channels as well: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, blah, 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 blah. It's all sitting there. And that's May 10th. So either way, would love to have some people from your side come over and see what conversations are happening in Canada. And Mikkel, appreciate you having me on your side. And hopefully at some point here, we'll get you back on. Or, I know you got your event coming up in March. Believe me, I've looked at the dates, and I'm having an internal argument right now. So who knows? Maybe I'll be down in Panama come March.
I think we should make it happen. I think it's going to be rad. I'd love to show you around. I think you get a huge kick out of it, and you just meet so many cool people. I think I'm going to take a page for your book. I don't think I'm going to take no.
You're not going to let me say no.
We'll make it happen. Shaun, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks again.